The Bronze Scales of Fu Hao. The year is 1200 BCE. You are standing in the capital of the Shang dynasty, the city of Anyang, watching a general prepare for war. She commands 13,000 soldiers. She is also a high priestess. And she is wearing bronze armor so precisely engineered that archaeologists who excavated her tomb nearly 3,000 years later would struggle to explain where it came from. Her name was Fu Hao, and in 1976, when archaeologist Shang broke through the floor of Tomb M5 at Yinshu, it became the only intact, undisturbed Shang royal consort tomb found through modern scientific excavation. Inside were over 1,600 bronze objects, including armor components cast in a tin-copper alloy with individual scales measuring between 8 and 12 centimeters, each fitted with pre-drilled lacing holes at a consistent diameter. That consistency implies standardized casting molds, not handcraft. Oracle bone inscriptions confirm Fu Hao led the largest recorded Shang military force. The armor she wore reflects generations of prior development. But here is the problem. There are no transitional forms, no crude early scales, no half-developed prototypes, no archaeological trail leading up to this moment. It appears in one royal tomb, fully mature, and then the record goes silent for 2 centuries. Comparable bronze-scale armor in the Near East dates to roughly the same century. 2 civilizations thousands of kilometers apart, arriving at the same non-obvious solution at nearly the same historical moment. Mainstream archaeology calls this convergent development. But convergent development usually leaves evidence of the convergence. Fu Hao's armor left only a question. The stone armor of the afterlife. But in 1998, excavators working near the Terracotta Army broke into a sealed pit designated K006 and found something that made no military sense. Not clay soldiers, not weapons. Hundreds of suits of armor, each assembled from precisely shaped limestone plates laced together with bronze wire. Some suits weighed 18 kilograms. No human being could move in them. They were never designed for a living soldier. They were built for the dead. And whoever built them did it to tolerances under 1 millimeter. Each suit comprises approximately 612 limestone body plates plus 74 helmet plates, totaling around 686 individually shaped pieces per complete set. The edge-to-edge precision across thousands of plates within a single suit averages under 1 millimeter of deviation. The bronze lacing wire is twisted in a specific 2-strand configuration that materials analysis suggests required approximately 14 hours of continuous wire work per suit. Qin cosmology designated stone as the material of permanence, and the emperor's underground kingdom reportedly covered 56 square kilometers. The mainstream interpretation is straightforward. These were ritual replicas, built to equip Qin Shi Huang's spirit army in the afterlife. But that explanation carries a harder question. Ritual objects across virtually every ancient culture are rough approximations. These are exact copies. A ghost does not need sub-millimeter tolerances. Someone cared about getting the details right in a way that goes far beyond comfort for the dead. Some researchers suggest the stone suits were built from actual armor as reference models, making K006 not a burial offering but a 3-dimensional archive, deliberately preserved in imperishable stone. The most accurate record of Qin military equipment we will ever have. And we still haven't found the iron originals. Paper armor. Imagine facing a cavalry charge wearing paper. Not as improvisation, not as desperation. As a deliberate tactical decision by one of the most battle-tested military establishments in the medieval world. Chinese soldiers went into combat wearing compressed paper armor, and the historical record says it worked. The Tang Huiyao compiled in 961 CE, lists paper armor, Jijia, as one of 13 officially recognized armor categories in the imperial armory. It was standard issue. Song dynasty records specify construction from 90 layers of compressed mulberry paper, lacquered and shaped over a leather or cloth base layer. General Qin Zhaitong's field test is recorded in the Song Shu. He reportedly ordered 7 soldiers to fire crossbow bolts at the chest piece before approving the design for mass production. It passed. Paper armor was issued specifically for naval and coastal defense units where iron corroded rapidly and weight threatened stability on water. Modern reconstruction studies have confirmed that multi-layer compressed paper, particularly when lacquered, resists sword cuts and significantly slows arrow penetration through the same mechanism as modern Kevlar, fiber deformation, and energy dispersion across layers. Mainstream historians classify this as pragmatic substitution. Iron was expensive, paper was abundant. It worked adequately, and adequately was enough. But Qin Zhaitong did not issue paper armor because he lacked iron. He tested it against crossbow bolts and chose it. The Song dynasty, running one of the most sophisticated military procurement systems in history, cataloged it as a peer category to iron plate. That is not an army making do. That is an army that had figured something out 2,000 years before material science could tell them why it was true. Armored silk. A Xiongnu arrow crosses the northern steppe at full velocity and strikes a Han frontier soldier in the chest. It punches through his outer layers, through padded cloth, and then meets something unexpected. A tightly woven cylinder of raw silk. The arrowhead does not cut through. The fibers elongate around the point and wrap it, bleeding off velocity, holding. The soldier survives. Somewhere in a Han garrison along the Gansu corridor around 200 BCE, a military administrator takes note. References to silk used in armor construction appear in the Han Shu, the Book of Han compiled by Ban Gu around 111 CE. The practical properties were understood empirically by Han commanders long before any theoretical framework existed. Raw silk fiber carries a tensile strength of approximately 500 megapascals, stronger than most structural steel by weight. When an arrowhead penetrates silk, the fibers do not sever. They deform, elongate, and wrap around the point, dramatically reducing penetration. Modern ballistic testing has confirmed that 30-layer raw silk panels stop simulated ancient arrowheads without fiber severance. NATO research organizations have explored silk composites for modern ballistic applications, citing the Han empirical record as a historical data point. Silk armor was expensive, roughly 1 to 3 years of a common soldier's annual pay per garment, meaning it began as an elite technology before entering wider use. The mainstream explanation is that commanders first noticed silk-wrapped wounds were easier to treat, since an arrowhead embedded in silk could be removed by pulling the fabric rather than cutting around the bone. But field medicine explains adoption. It does not explain systematic frontier deployment as a standard armor component. You do not issue 2,000 silk underarmors to a border garrison because they make convenient bandages. You issue them because your soldiers come home. The lamellar puzzle. 3 civilizations, 3 continents, no confirmed contact, and every single one of them is assembling armor from hundreds of small rectangular plates, laced exclusively to each other, using the same non-obvious knot sequence to form the same articulated self-supporting matrix. Warring States Chinese contexts in Yunnan and Inner Mongolia, Achaemenid Persian tomb reliefs at Persepolis, Scythian burial mounds on the Pontic steppe. All dating to within roughly the same 5th to 4th century BCE window. Lamellar armor is not an intuitive invention. Scale armor, where plates attach to a backing, is the obvious solution. Lamellar, where plates lace only to each other with no backing at all, is the counterintuitive one. It is more flexible, more repairable, more resistant to penetration. But you have to understand the completed system before you begin, because building it wrong produces nothing functional. A complete lamellar suit requires between 600 and 1,500 individual plates, each cut to tolerances of plus or minus 2 millimeters for the lacing matrix to hold. Russian armor historian M.V. Gorelik documented in his comprehensive research on steppe and Central Asian armor that the specific lacing sequence, forward upward through 2 holes, backward downward through 2 holes, is closely consistent across Chinese, Central Asian, and early Byzantine examples separated by 1,500 years. The mainstream explanation favors steppe origin and transmission eastward and westward through nomadic military contact. That theory is plausible. But transmission along trade routes typically leaves intermediate forms, partial adoptions, hybrid systems. Instead, every tradition produces the complete mature system with no developmental trail at the same historical moment. Some researchers ask whether that simultaneous arrival is too precise to be coincidence. Whether 3 separate military cultures independently invented the same non-obvious lacing pattern in the same century because they were all facing the same enemy, the mounted steppe archer, and the engineering constraints produced only one real answer. The Black Army. Stand on a hillside in 221 BCE and watch the Qin army approach. Every soldier wears the same black armor. Every crossbow bolt in every quiver is the same length, the same weight, the same head geometry. If a soldier falls and drops his weapon, the man beside him can pick it up and fire it without adjustment. You are not watching an army. You are watching a manufacturing system. Analysis of over 40,000 bronze arrowheads from the terracotta army pits revealed that 3-flanged heads cluster in 3 distinct size groups with standard deviations of less than 1/1500ths of a millimeter, a precision that exceeds most pre-industrial manufacturing anywhere in the ancient world. The Qin Administrative Legal Code, the Qin Lu, partially recovered from the Shuihuri tomb, dated 217 BCE, specifies armor weight standards and defines penalties for armor failing inspection. This is among the earliest documented military armor quality control regulations in history. Sima Qian's Shiji records that Qin adopted black as its imperial color through its association with the element water, which Qin cosmology held would extinguish the Zhou dynasty's fire. The entire army wore black as a cosmological declaration of conquest. Paint residue analysis on terracotta army figures confirms black lacquer on armor surfaces and color-coded rank insignia beneath. Historians attribute this standardization to the legalist philosophical tradition, which demanded rule-based measurable systems over individual craftsmanship. That explains the motivation. It does not explain the mechanism. Wanting interchangeable parts and achieving them are entirely different engineering problems. The Qin solved a manufacturing precision challenge that must have required gauges, templates, and inspection protocols operating at scale. We can see the output. We have never found the factory, the lacquer armor of Chu. The year is 450 BCE, and the state of Chu is equipping its army with the highest performance armor in the ancient world. It is not bronze, it is not iron. It is animal hide, shaped and hardened through a process so technically sophisticated that modern materials scientists analyzing surviving specimens have measured its impact resistance as comparable to early iron plate at 1/3 the weight. The secret was lacquer, applied not once, but between 7 and 13 separate times, each coat laid in a fiber orientation perpendicular to the one beneath it. Excavations at Jiangling in Hubei province, particularly the Mashan tomb sites beginning in the 1970s, produced the best preserved examples of Chu lacquered armor ever found, still structurally intact after 2,400 years. The alternating perpendicular layup is the same structural principle as carbon fiber composite manufacturing in modern aerospace. The outer surface achieves a hardness comparable to soft iron. Total torso protection weighed approximately 3.5 to 4.5 kilograms against 8 to 12 kilograms for comparable bronze scale coverage. Chu military dominance during the mid-warring states period, when Chu controlled roughly one-third of China's territory, has been directly linked by historians including Mark Edward Lewis to logistical advantages, of which this lightweight high-performance armor was one component. Mainstream craft historians classify Chu lacquerwork as a regional tradition applied to military purposes, but there is a detail that resists that explanation. The alternating orientation layup is invisible in the finished product. It has no aesthetic function. Its only function is structural, and it happens to be the theoretically optimal configuration for that material combination. Someone understood cross-ply composites 2,400 years before the field existed to name them. After Qin conquered Chu in 223 BCE, the tradition ended and was never documented or preserved in later imperial armor records. We may never know how long it took to develop or exactly when the knowledge was lost. Mountain pattern armor. Look closely at the armor on a Han Dynasty tomb figurine. The plates are not flat. Running down the center of each one is a raised ridge, a tiny spine stamped into the metal, resembling the Chinese character for mountain. Shang. It looks like decoration. It is not. That ridge is a geometric stiffener. A 4 mm central rib on a 1 mm steel plate increases the plate's resistance to transverse bending by a factor of approximately 8 to 10 times compared to a flat plate of identical dimensions and weight, because stiffness scales with the square of the rib height. No additional material, no added weight, pure geometry. Chinese armorsmiths were building this principle into every plate during the Han Dynasty, and the design persisted largely unchanged through the Tang, a continuous span of roughly 900 years. The Dunhuang Cave, 220 murals, dated by inscription to 642 CE, show mountain pattern armor in sufficient detail to estimate individual ridge heights at approximately 3 to 5 millimeters, within the range modern structural modeling identifies as optimal for that plate thickness. Physical specimens in the National Museum of China confirm that the ridge was cold-formed by stamping, adding zero weight to the finished plate. European armor plates with equivalent geometric ribbing appear in the late 14th century CE, approximately 15 to 1600 years after the earliest Chinese mountain pattern documentation. Mainstream military historians classify the design as a Chinese aesthetic tradition, the mountain character association being symbolically resonant in cosmology and culture. But aesthetic traditions do not survive 900 years of battlefield attrition unless they also perform. And the rib is geometrically precise in a way that delivers specific mechanical advantages with no aesthetic explanation. The mountain did not just look powerful, it was. From the geometry of a single plate, we move to the engineering challenge of covering something 5 times the size of a human body in metal without slowing it down. The Iron Horse. The mural is 1,500 years old, painted on the wall of a tomb near modern Zhengzhou. It shows a horse in full iron armor, chanfron over the face, pétrole across the chest, flanchards at the flanks, crupper over the hindquarters. Every surface of the animal encased in articulated metal. The horse weighs over 500 kilograms. The armor adds another 25 to 35. This is a weapons platform, and it appeared during the Northern Wei Dynasty 386 to 534 CE, in a state of complete engineering sophistication with no visible developmental sequence in the Chinese archaeological record. 2 murals from Henan province dating to the Northern Wei period contain detailed pictorial records of cataphract warfare, including fully armored horses in the 6-component barding configuration. Physical barding fragments recovered from a Northern Wei tomb in Liaoning province include iron lamellar plates with intact lacing, allowing reconstruction of the complete system. A full cataphract combination, armored horse plus armored rider, represented a capital investment equivalent to roughly 40 years of a common soldier's annual pay. The Weishu, compiled 554 CE, describes cataphract units as elite line breakers deployed specifically to shatter disciplined infantry formations. Mainstream historians trace this tradition to the Xianbei people, the ethnically non-Han founders of Northern Wei, who carried Central Asian and Parthian cataphract heritage through steppe contact. That transmission is plausible and widely accepted, but the system arrives in its mature form. Full 6-component barding, complete articulation, documented immediately in its finished state, with no prototype sequence visible beneath it. Some researchers studying parallel developments in Koguryo, Korea, and Kofun, Japan during the same 4th to 5th century window have begun asking whether a broader East Asian military horizon was producing horse armor independently, in parallel, rather than inheriting a single transmitted tradition. We do not yet have the transitional evidence to be certain either way. Ming full plate and the convergence problem. Place a suit of 15th century Ming dynasty plate armor beside a suit of 15th century Italian Gothic plate. Step back. 2 separate metallurgical traditions, 2 separate continents, 2 separate everything. The silhouette is almost identical. Articulated limb protection, curved chest plate engineered to deflect rather than absorb. Segmented waist defense, fully enclosed helmet. The same solution, emerging from the same century in 2 civilizations with no documented military exchange. Ming Dynasty military texts and illustrated armor manuals of the 15th century describe full plate components whose breastplate geometry, convex curved surface, medial ridge, flanged edges, mirrors Italian Gothic plate of the same period. Surviving Ming plate armor in the Palace Museum collection includes articulated arm defenses using pivot rivet construction, the same pivot rivet articulation system appearing in contemporaneous European plate. Comparative analysis of surviving specimens has noted that the curvature geometry of Ming and Italian breastplates shows statistically similar deflection angles, both within 5 to 8 degrees of the theoretically optimal angle for deflecting the sword and arrow threats each tradition faced. The conventional explanation is convergent evolution. Both traditions were responding to improvements in weapons that made earlier armor inadequate. Given the same threats and the same available materials, the same engineering solutions emerge. That argument is coherent. It explains the general solution, but it does not fully explain the specific details. Curved breastplates, pivot rivet articulation, medial ridges, flanged edges. These are not inevitable. They are choices among many possible approaches, and both traditions made the same choices at the same moment in isolation. A minority of researchers have suggested that Mongol military culture, which briefly unified the Eurasian landmass and then scattered across it, may have seeded both Chinese and European armoring traditions with common technical influences that then developed in parallel. If so, the convergence is real, but it converged from a common ancestor that no longer exists in the record. 10 armor types across 3,000 years, bronze scales that appear without a prototype. Stone suits built to tolerances no ghost requires, paper that stops crossbow bolts, silk that outperforms metal, a lacing pattern that emerges simultaneously on 3 continents. An army color-coded by cosmology to sub-millimeter precision. Lacquer composites that disappear with the civilization that invented them. A geometric principle embedded in a character for mountain. Horse armor that arrives fully formed. And two traditions on opposite ends of the world building the same articulated plate in the same decade. The mainstream framework, convergent evolution, trade transmission, independent innovation under shared constraints, explains most of this. Most, not all. What these armor types collectively suggest is a civilization conducting materials science through battlefield observation long before the theoretical language existed to describe what it was doing. The knowledge lived in the craft. It passed through hands, not texts. And when the dynasties that carried it fell, sometimes it fell with them. Most people walk past these objects in a museum and see display cases. You made it here. You already know they are data. Hit subscribe and tell us in the comments which armor on this list you think the mainstream explanation handles least convincingly. Make your case. 3,000 years of soldiers who could not explain why their armor worked, only that it did. The knowledge was always in the craft. The mystery was always in the silence between the plates. Subscribe. There is more in the archive.